Hey, welcome back to Mocktails with Marina. I'm your host, Marina, and today I want to tell you about a conversation I had a few weeks ago with someone who was super frustrated. She had started a business, she was posting consistently, she had clients, she genuinely wanted it to work. And she was sitting across from me virtually, and she said, I just don't understand why it's not growing faster. I'm doing everything right. I asked her one question. I said, when was the last time you did something uncomfortable for your business? Not in a hard strategic way, like uncomfortable in a I might embarrass myself or fail publicly kind of way. She was quiet for a second, and then she said, I don't really put myself out there like that. And there it was. She was doing all the right things, the safe things. She was showing up when it felt good. She was posting when she felt inspired. She was taking clients she liked and passing on the ones who made her nervous. She was, by her own definition, trying. But trying and committing are not the same thing. Today we're talking about commitment, what it actually looks like, what separates the people who make it from the people who almost make it. And I'm going to get into some specifics, contracts, money decisions, the moments where your real level of commitment actually get revealed. So we're also building directly off of the last episode where we talked about operating from love versus fear, because commitment is love in action. It's what love looks like when things get hard. So let's get right into it. Here's the framing I want you to sit with. The difference between a professional and a hobbyist is not talent. It isn't even work ethic necessarily. It's commitment to the outcome, regardless of how it feels on any given Tuesday. And side note, when I say any given Tuesday, I mean any given Tuesday, whether the economy's doing great or not, whether the neighborhood is happy, whether the weather is nice or not. It does not matter what the circumstance is. Commitment is commitment regardless of how it feels. Like the day, right? A hobbyist makes decisions based on what feels comfortable right now. A professional makes decisions based on what they said they were going to do. A hobbyist treats their business like a creative project that they're just exploring. A professional treats it like a thing that they are responsible for, to themselves, to their clients, and to the version of their life that they said that they wanted. Now, I want to be really careful here because I'm not talking about hustle culture. I'm not telling you to grind yourself into the ground. You know that's not my thing. My whole business is built around lifestyle design. I barely work 20 hours a week. But within those hours, I'm a professional. I show up, I follow through, I do what I said I was going to do. And that distinction matters more than anything else. Let me give you a really concrete example. Earlier this year, as I've alluded to this before, we went through the postpartum period, and still am, with Bula Baby. And it would have been really easy and honestly really understandable to just let things slide, to say, I'll get back to it when I feel better, to push episodes, to delay client deliverables, to let the business coast while I recovered. And I did give myself grace, don't get me wrong. I was intentional about my capacity. Tyler and I planned for it. But here's what I didn't do. I didn't cancel on clients. I didn't stop delivering. I didn't let the agreements I had made, the contracts I had signed, just quietly expire because life got hard. Because when you signed that contract, you were making a promise, and the professional version of you keeps promises even when the hobbyist version of you wants to take a nap. Now, that being said, I do want to talk about contracts specifically because I think this is where a lot of business owners reveal their actual relationship with commitment. A contract is not just a legal document. It's a record of what you agreed to do when you were thinking clearly, when you weren't stressed, when you weren't overwhelmed, when you sat down and said, yes, this is the work I will do for this amount of money by this date, right? And then life happens. You get overwhelmed, the client becomes more difficult than expected, the scope creeps a little, you stop liking the project, and suddenly that contract starts to feel like a trap instead of a commitment. Yikes. And on the flip side, maybe you signed a contract with someone else to help you expand your business. Same thing applies, right? You got overwhelmed. So you as the client become more difficult than expected. And due to that, you are asking either for a scope creep or to just completely pull out. Either way, not good, y'all, right? Here's what I've seen happen over and over again. People start looking for exits when they start to feel that overwhelm. They start forgetting to follow up. They deliver work that's technically within scope, but they know it isn't their best. They let communication get slower and slower, hoping the client won't notice or, vice versa, whether they are the client or they are serving a client. Or they dramatically overreact to one hard interaction and try to dissolve the entire relationship. And the thing is, none of that on either side of the equation is professional behavior. Following through on a contract, even when it's uncomfortable, even when you found better clients since then, even when the payment was too low and you know it now, that's the professional move, right? So here's why this matters, just beyond the immediate situation. Your reputation is built in the moments when keeping your word costs you something. Anyone can show up when it's easy, okay? The bar for professionalism is what you do when it's not easy. Now, I'm not saying that you should martyr yourself. If a client is genuinely abusive, that's different. If there is a real breach on their end, that's different. There are legitimate reasons to exit agreements. But this got hard is not a legitimate reason. I underpriced this is not a legitimate reason. I don't feel like it anymore is absolutely not a legitimate reason. If just because life gets hard, that does not give you an excuse to go back on what you have committed to. When I work with the bar industry clients on retainer, every engagement starts with a contract. And there have been seasons, particularly in the early postpartum months, where I looked at my deliverables and I thought, this feels like a lot. But I didn't renegotiate midstream. I planned better for the next contract cycle. I honored what I had signed. Because the version of me that signed that contract knew what she was doing, and I'm not going to disrespect her judgment because present me is tired. There's also something deeper happening here, and it connects directly to the last episode. When you operate from fear, which is what we talked about last week, you look at a hard contract and you think, how do I get out of this? You're protecting yourself. You're looking for safety, right? But when you operate from love, from a genuine love of your work and respect for the people that you've made promises to, you look at that same hard contract and you think, how do I get through this well? That's the shift. Same contract, same difficulty, different orientation. The professional asks, how do I get through this well? The hobbyist asks, how do I get out of this? Okay, now I want to talk about money because I think how someone handles financial pressure is one of the clearest indicators of their professional mindset. When things get tight, and they will at some point for almost every business owner, there are two responses. Response 1, scale everything down, cut expenses, cancel subscriptions, downgrade your tools, pause your ads, stop investing in anything until the runway comes back. Response 2, figure out how to make more money. The first feels responsible. It feels like discipline. And honestly, there are moments where some version of it is appropriate. I'm not telling you to spend money that you don't have. But I see so many people default to shrinking as their only strategy. And what happens when you shrink everything? You operate from scarcity. You attract scarcity. You make decisions from fear. You stop investing in the things that would actually grow your revenue. The professional mindset, especially for a service-based business, especially for a creative entrepreneur, is to ask the revenue question first. Not what can I cut, but what can I create? Let me make this really concrete. Let's say you're a coach or a consultant and you have a slow month. Your retainers are solid, but one client paused and now you're looking at like a $2,000 gap in your monthly revenue. Or maybe you are a bar in Phoenix and it's summertime. Same thing is applying, right? The hobbyist starts cutting. They cancel Canva Pro. They pause the email marketing tool. Maybe they even drop a subscription they actually really need for client work because it feels like being responsible. The professional asks, where can I generate $2,000 this month? Can I offer a one-time strategy session to my email list? Can I fill an open consulting slot? Can I run a short promotional window on a course or product? Can I reach out directly to 3 people I already know and offer them something specific? In the context of a bar, can I throw a party? Is there someone who's sticking around during the summer that we can celebrate? What are those regulars into? Should we launch a new menu? Should we get creative with recipes, make something fresh, right? Should we change our hours, be more available? This is exactly how I think about my own ecosystem. My podcast, like this podcast, is a revenue machine. And not because it's monetized directly, but because every episode moves people toward one of our courses. So when I need to drive revenue, I definitely don't cut my podcast production. I definitely don't cut our ads. The same ad has been going for 2.5 years, but I lean into it harder. Like I record more intentionally. I make sure every call to action is doing its job. Creating more is almost always available to you. Cutting is the path of least resistance, and least resistance is rarely the path to the business you actually want. Now, I also want to name something about the emotional component here. Shrinking your expenses when things get hard can feel like self-punishment, like you're disciplining your business for not performing. And that energy, like that punishing energy, is the opposite of what you need to get things growing again. Investing in your revenue, getting creative, asking, what can I build right now? That's an act of faith in yourself. It's operating from love for the business that you're building, not fear about what you might lose. And that's the through line. Last episode, this episode, all of it, right? Fear contracts. Love expands. And if your business is in a contraction phase, the most important question is, what are you operating from? So I want to give you some more like texture here, because I think commitment sounds abstract until you see it in specific moments beyond just the contracts, beyond just the subscriptions, right? But here are some of the places I've seen commitment, or the absence of it, show up in real business. The podcast that goes dark for 3 months and then comes back with an episode about consistency. And I'm saying this with love because we've all seen it. Maybe we've all done a version of it. But I want you to understand what that communicates, not just to your audience, but to yourself. Every time you break a commitment you made to your own business, you're teaching yourself that your word doesn't matter, that it's negotiable, that when it gets hard, you'll stop. And you wonder why you don't trust yourself, right? Now, very important caveat here. If it's something that you can plan, like you have a maternity leave coming up, like I did, or you know that you are in your final semester of law school and then you're about to take your big finals and you're about to take your bar, then of course, those are legitimate big life events that deserve your full attention. But I'm talking about the kind of hard that you may not realize is happening, where you just start to feel sludgy, or some other event happens in life that is unexpected, right? Commitment builds self-trust. Every time you do what you said you would do, every episode you record, every email you send, every client call you show up to be fully present, you're making a deposit. You're proving to yourself that you're someone who follows through. And that internal credibility is the one thing that lets you take bigger risks later. It's the foundation. Now, let's say something truly is taking so much of your time that was unexpected. It's just about not dropping the ball entirely, because consistency doesn't mean that you're showing up 100% of the time. It just means you're showing up the best you can 100% of the time. Here's another one. The entrepreneur who hires a coach or joins a high-level program, usually at a significant investment, and then doesn't show up fully. Like, they don't do the work. They watch the recordings instead of attending live. They skip the hard assignments. They don't watch the actual course. And then at the end, they said, it wasn't really worth it. It wasn't worth it because you didn't give it the chance to be worth it. You paid for the room, but you didn't sit in the chair. Commitment means full presence. It means showing up the same way at week 8 of a program as you did at week 1. It means doing the uncomfortable homework even when you could technically skip it. The investment you made with money means nothing if you don't follow it with commitment of time, attention, and effort. One more. The business owner who keeps pivoting. Every quarter, a new offer. Every season, a new niche. Every time something doesn't work immediately, a pivot. I get it. Iteration is real. Strategy evolves. I'm not saying never change, but there's a difference between strategic evolution and commitment avoidance. Some people pivot because the data tells them to, and some people pivot because they haven't committed long enough to actually get data. Commitment requires a long enough runway to see results. Podcasting is a great example of this. It takes most shows 12 to 18 months at least of consistent output before the growth starts to compound. If you quit at month 4, you'll never know what month 14 would have looked like. And honestly, in our case, it was once we hit episode 100, which took us 2 years, okay? So imagine if I'd quit at month 4 and this episode never came to be. The professionals who make it are not necessarily the most talented or the most strategic. They are almost always the ones who stayed around long enough. Now, there's something I want to say about what commitment actually does to you and not just your business, right? When you commit fully to something, like when you stop holding one foot out the door, your identity actually starts to shift. You stop being someone who's trying to build a business and you start being a business owner. That sounds subtle, but it's everything. The questions you ask change. The decisions you make change. What you're willing to do changes. I went through this myself. For a while, I was building this business while still holding on to the identity of bar industry professional, which I am. That's real. That's my expertise. That's where my clients come from. But there was a period where I wasn't fully letting myself be the podcast host, the course creator, the entrepreneur. I was doing those things while also keeping one foot in the familiar. And the moment I committed to the full identity, the moment I said, this is who I am, not just what I'm trying, things accelerated. Because commitment changes how other people perceive you too. Clients can feel whether you're all in. Your audience can feel it too. There's a different energy in the work of someone who has committed versus someone who's still deciding. This is also why I talk so much about lifestyle design as a strategy and not an afterthought. When I say I've built my business that works in 20 hours a week while being present for our baby, that's not an accident. That was a commitment I made before I knew exactly how to execute it. I just decided that it was possible, and then I figured out how to make it true. The commitment came before the clarity. That's usually how it works. You don't figure it all out and then commit. You commit and the figuring out follows. And that's terrifying. I know it is. It was for me. But operating from love, from genuine love of the life you want and the respect for the people you want to serve, makes that commitment easier. Not easy, easier. Because when you love something, you protect it, you invest in it, you show up for it, even when it's hard. That's what commitment looks like from the inside. Now, I want to give you something tangible before we close. Here are the questions I use in my own business and with consulting clients to assess real commitment level. Not the aspiration, but like the actual current reality. 1, are you doing what you said you would do even when it's inconvenient? Not just for your clients, but for yourself. For the business plan you wrote, for the content schedule you set, for the program you enrolled in, are you showing up the way you committed to show up? 2, when something gets hard financially, is your first question, what can I create? Or what can I cut? This doesn't mean ignore your expenses. It means check your orientation first. Revenue solves most cash flow problems better than austerity does. 3, Are you honoring your agreements, contracts, commitments, even informal promises, even when it would be easier to let them slide? Your word is your reputation. It compounds. 4, how long have you actually given your current strategy? If the answer is less than 6 months and you're already reconsidering, pause before pivoting. Give it real runway before you decide it doesn't work. 5, when you think about your business, do you think of it as something you're trying or something you're building? The language matters. The identity matters. The commitment you're living from matters most. Last episode, we talked about what it meant to operate from love instead of fear, and I've been thinking about that a lot since then, about how that concept shows up in commitment specifically. Fear says, what if it doesn't work? What if this is all a waste of time? What if I fully commit and still fail? Love says, this matters enough to me to give it everything I have, and whatever happens, I will show up fully for something I actually care about. That's the professional mindset. It's not arrogance or certainty. It's love. Love for the work, for the clients, for the life you're building, for the version of yourself who took this seriously. I think about this when I'm recording episodes at 5 a.m. with a newborn. I think about it when I'm reviewing a client deliverable for the 4th time because it's not quite right yet. I think about it when I'm doing the work that nobody sees, the behind the scenes, the admin, the strategy that never ends up on an Instagram carousel. This is the work, and I love it. Not every day, not every task, but I love what it's building. I love who it's making me. And that love is what what makes commitment not just possible, but inevitable. You don't have to have it all figured out. You don't have to be certain it will work. You just have to decide, I am committed to this, and then let that decision lead. If this episode resonated with you, especially the parts about operating from love or about what you're doing with money decisions in your business, I'd love to hear from you. Please send me, a DM on Instagram at Mocktails with Marina, or send me an email, hello@marinamars.com. Leave a review, or just share this with someone who's in the thick of building something. And if you're ready to take your non-alc business seriously, to treat it like the professional you are, please check out my program, Bula Boss, marinamars.com/BULABOSS. The link is also in the show notes. Thank you so much for being here. I'll see you next week. But as always, if you need anything, you just let me know.